Welcome back, Dive. Our mission today is, well, it seems straightforward on the surface, but the sources we're unpacking they're deceptively heavy.
They really are.
We are undertaking a comprehensive critique of one of the world's most ubiquitous, and I think for many people, one of the most frustrating digital spaces, the professional networking giant, LinkedIn.
And we should acknowledge right up front for you, the learner, that this isn't just about, dissecting an online resume tool.
No, not at all.
The material we've synthesized, and it's a powerful stack of articles, some really deep analyses, it argues that we have to unpack how LinkedIn transformed, how it went from this simple initial idea into something that one of our most comprehensive critiques just flat out describes as everything wrong with modern society.
And that's the key question guiding us today, isn't it? How did a platform that was built on this seemingly wholesome professional idea of connects?
Right.
How did it manage to evolve into a digital space that so many users now experience as, quote, fake persona, manufactured enthusiasm, endless AI slop, and a truly soul-crushing job search experience?
Yeah.
We have this extensive collection of source material, and they paint a really compelling, if pretty cynical, picture of a deliberate, step-by-step psychological warfare, and it's all just disguised as mandatory professional networking.
It's maybe one of those critical deep dives we've done because no matter where you are in your career, whether you're a new graduate or, a seasoned professional changing field, the reality is that the platform is structurally designed to prey on the whole. It dangles the promise of entry into the professional world, but far too often it delivers only disappointment.
It just draws you into this cycle.
A never-ending cycle of performance, of searching, and of course of financial health.
Okay, so let's anchor this analysis in that immediate reality, that pain point that really sets this whole.
Let's do it.
For so many people, especially those just trying to break into the job market, trying to use LinkedIn to actually land an interview, let alone a job, is, and this is a direct quote from one of our sources, complete soul crush.
That phrase is just so powerful because it captures the visceral, the draining experience of it all.
It really does.
You spend years grinding away in school, you get the qualifications, and then boom, you're immediately faced with this high-stakes digital brick wall. The user experience feels like it's specifically designed to be demoralized.
We're talking about endless interviews, right? These multi-stage processes that just go nowhere.
Exactly. Or flaky recruiters who just ghost you without a word. And all the while, you have that slow, grinding feeling of watching your savings dwindle and frankly, your sanity, as this search just drags on and on.
And right there, in that moment of anxiety, LinkedIn is perfectly positioned to monetize it.
Oh, perfect. The platform is designed to capitalize on that exact desperation. When you're at your lowest point, when you feel the most vulnerable, that's when they show up.
With the offers for the monthly subscriptions.
With the offers. They show you statistics. They dangle that promise that, premium will give you the edge you need to finally get past the gatekeepers.
The cynical brilliance of it is the timing.
It's the time. If you're unemployed, you're already struggling financially, and you feel compelled to pay that $30, $40 a month, believing that this is the key.
The critical competitive advantage you were missing.
Yes. It creates this truly captive audience that's rooted in both aspiration and a deep fear of being professionally left behind.
And the paradox is, as the sources repeatedly point out, that while the site is now just demonstrably polluted, it's full of empty corporate bragging, AI-written slop, and let's be frank, con artists selling useless courses, but you can't avoid it. For huge parts of the modern corporate workforce, it's unavoidable.
If you're not there, you barely exist professionally. And that is the core contradiction we have to grapple with today. It speaks to the platform's incredible, almost inescapable power. You look at the site and you see these absolutely cringe-worthy posts.
Oh, the ridiculous humble brags, the CEOs posting crying selfies after they've just done mass layoffs.
All of it. And yet, if you don't at least maintain a presence there, if you don't learn how to dance the dance and adopt some level of that manufactured corporate persona,
their career could genuinely suffer.
It really could. You're essentially forced to participate in a system that you might despise, a system designed to manipulate your deepest professional anxieties just to avoid being marginalized.
It's a masterful, almost insidious piece of corporate psychology. And to understand how we got here, we have to go back to the architect. We have to talk about Reid Hoffman.
Indeed. We had to start with Reid Hoffman because while he stands up there with the biggest names in tech, his influence is unique. Unlike people like, say, Gates or Jobs, who were defined by their public image or these wild product innovations, Hoffman was fundamentally defined by his connection. He was the human nexus, the ultimate connector in early Silicon Valley.
The man truly pulling the strings in the background, making things happen without ever needing the spotlight.
Precisely. In the immediate wake of the dot-com bubble, early 2000s, capital was drying up, skepticism was high, If you were a serious player in the Valley, he was the person you absolutely had to know.
His value wasn't just his own ideas, it was the access.
It was the access he provided, and a large part of this influence came from his prominent, though maybe less publicized, role at PayPal, which of course famously birthed the PayPal mafia.
Right, and when we talk about that group, we usually hear the big, loud Elon Musk, Peter Thiel. Maybe Hoffman gets a mention as a co-founder, but the story usually focuses on the more eccentric.
That's the public perception, yes. But the sources we've looked at really emphasize that Hoffman was actually the crucial strategic mover behind the scenes in so many of those landmark deals.
Okay, give us an example.
Let's take the most famous one. Peter Thiel gets all the credit for being one of the very first investors in Facebook, which, it became perhaps the most landmark investment in tech history. That's widely known.
But the sources say it wasn't just a random meeting.
Not at all. It was Hoffman who actually brokered that absolutely critical meeting. He's the one who took Thiel and introduced him to a very young Mark Zuckerberg. He had the operational network, and more importantly, he just profoundly understood the power of leveraging those specific nodes of influence.
So he saw connections not just as, friendships, but as raw economic power.
Exactly. So his ambition wasn't to be the face of the revolution, but to build and own the infrastructure that connected the revolutionary. That way, he'd benefit no matter which idea succeeded.
That's the perfect.
And this realization led him to decide to turn that laser focus on connections into a tangible, marketable, and eventually a massively scalable product.
And he had some experience here, right? He wasn't a total stranger to social networks.
Not entirely. He'd been involved with one of the very first attempts back in the late 90s, a site called SocialNet.
Which failed. But as they say in Silicon Valley, failures are often the best teachers.
Absolutely. That early platform failed because it didn't solve a core need, or more accurately, it didn't figure out the critical components for viral growth, but it taught him a priceless lesson about virality, how to actually get a platform off the ground, and more importantly, how to use existing social dynamics to force adoption.
Which brings us to the launch, 2003. The simple, almost deceptively innocuous initial launch of LinkedIn.
It was almost laughably simple compared to the monster it is today. It was essentially just a web page where you could put your resume online and connect it to other professional people you knew.
And the sources note he wasn't even the first to have the site.
No, but his wealth from the PayPal sale, his deeply ingrained business sense, and most crucially, his established network of high-value connections, that gave him the unassailable head start he needed.
Okay, now let's really unpack his two-stage growth strategy, because this is where the platform's foundational psychology of manipulation truly began to solidify.
This is the core of it.
Hoffman himself detailed this in a pretty candid 2014 interview with Sam Altman. Walk us through those stages, especially stage 2, because that feels like the crucial mechanism for understanding LinkedIn's cynicism.
Okay, so stage 1, as Hoffman described it, was easy. The first 1,000 users or so were acquired through direct personal invitations to his extensive network.
His Silicon Valley contacts.
The VCs, the CEOs, the immediate influencers. That was simple momentum built. But the difficult part, the part that required exponential, unstoppable growth, that required stage 2. And we could definitively call stage 2 the FOMO hack.
Fear of missing out, surgically applied and weaponized for professional networking.
Precisely. Hoffman needed to cultivate this pervasive belief among professionals that everyone they knew, everyone who mattered, was already on the site.
And if you didn't join immediately,
your entire career trajectory would be overshadowed. You would be fundamentally left behind. And this isn't just a commercial tact. It's a profound psychological strategy. It taps into that deep-seated, painful anxiety of professional obsolescence.
The genius, or maybe the malice, is in the implementation, right? How did he actually operationalize this massive engineered fear? Because just sending one invite wasn't going to be enough to get that kind of viral growth.
No. The key innovation, as he explained it, was getting people to upload your address book and see who else you knew was in LinkedIn. But the sources explained that Hoffman was only telling the sanitized half of the story there.
Okay.
The truly crucial detail was the vague, almost misleading tactic they use to get people to do this upload and then trigger the subsequent invitation spam.
Let's talk about that infamous Outlook plugin, the subtle deception involved.
Right. So LinkedIn started heavily pushing its own plugin for Outlook, which at the time was the dominant corporate email client. It was everywhere. To the first wave of users, the process seemed benign. It seemed purely functional. The plugin would take your email contacts, check which ones were already on LinkedIn, and then the site would ask if you wanted to invite other people.
Okay. Sounds reasonable so far.
But here's the critical distinction. The invitation prompt was deliberately vague. It subtly manipulated the user into believing they were just confirming existing connections, or maybe sending a request to someone who might already be there.
I see it now. So you, as the user, think you're confirming maybe 5 or 10 important professional contacts.
Right.
not initiating an unsolicited mass invite to potentially hundreds of personal and professional contacts who might have never even heard of the platform.
It was a digital bait and switch. The result was that people accidentally, or at least unknowingly, sent mass emails to their entire address book.
Oh, wow.
We're talking old college classmates, family, random acquaintances. Everyone they'd ever emailed was getting an invite to join LinkedIn.
And the sources said it took, what, 3 emails on average for someone to actually join?
Yeah, so they had to be bugged multiple times by different people. But the sheer volume of these accidental, multi-pronged invitations was enough to create the required network effect. It created the illusion of mandatory participation.
And that explains how it grew like a weed. It wasn't organic growth driven by quality. It was engineered growth driven by exploiting human error and professional FOMO.
And it surpassed their already incredibly ambitious growth projections by more than double. It was a fascinating but ultimately chilling piece of early viral engine.
And this is where the core critique really starts to gain momentum, isn't it? I mean, imagine if LinkedIn had just stayed a simple, high-value digital address.
A curated, bare-bones directory. You wouldn't have to wade through the current mess of scam artists and life coaches and motivational slop.
The job market might be simpler, fairer, and certainly less psychologically taxing. But that version of the platform would never maximize profit.
Not even close. Okay, let's unpack the aggressive monetization then, because this is the pivot where they go beyond just engineering network effects and start hacking the fundamental constraints of professional interaction.
They realize they can sell access to the scarcity they just manufactured.
That's it exactly. The sources are remarkably clear on the strategy. To monetize the product to its maximum extent, Hoffman had to push beyond typical societal constraint. He had to hack the very same FOMO principle he'd used for growth.
Wow.
By offering people who paid extra an artificial level of reach and connectivity that non-paying users just couldn't access. They created a tiered system of anxiety.
And the very first and most enduring example of this is InMail, which they rolled out in 2005, only 2 years after.
InMail was the original premium feature, and its introduction just fundamentally altered the concept of professional boundary. For a monthly fee, you can bypass the organic connection requirements and send direct messages, which quickly became mass spam to people you weren't connected with.
Even people 3 degrees of separation away, right? Friends of friends of friends.
Reaching deep into otherwise inaccessible network. And the cynicism that the source material reveals about InMail is truly startling.
What do you mean?
The analysis points out that the original press release for the feature admitted that most of these messages wouldn't get replies.
They admitted it.
They did, but people still bought the service anyway, often paying hundreds or even thousands of dollars for corporate license. It was the explicit start of monetizing the professional hope machine.
It's the classic startup strategy as defined in our...
Start out with a good system, then gradually make it worse while squeezing the user base for money. Once they had the professional community hooked on the idea of mandatory participation, they could begin the slow, steady, profitable erosion of free features.
And today, that squeezing is immense. Individual professional subscriptions start around $30 a month, and the higher tiers for visitors are exponential.
And the selling point is always the same. It's always leveraging that anxiety. They dangle statistics about how much more likely you are to get a job or find a lead if you just subscribe.
Which, as the sources highlight, creates a profound financial conflict of interest.
Undeniable. If you get a job, you immediately cancel the subscription. You don't need the search tool anymore.
So it's financially in LinkedIn's interest to keep its paying users searching.
Searching for as long as possible. They thrive on perpetual uncertainty.
And they do this by creating these artificial barriers, don't they? Things that used to be baseline functionality like seeing who viewed your profile are now locked behind ever higher paywalls.
Precisely. They've layered the platform with increasing degrees of artificial scarcity. Premium Plus, recruiter accounts, Sales Navigator, all sorts of layers and restrictions on features that were once just part of the free experience.
They didn't just build the marketplace. They built the corporate maze, and then they started selling incredibly expensive, non-comprehensive maps to navigate.
And the problem with that maze analogy, you pay for the map, but the walls keep, which just constantly reinforces the cycle of desperation and the perceived need to keep paying.
But the platform didn't just monetize access, it fundamentally shifted its core identity. It began this slow, deliberate pivot toward becoming a generalized social media platform.
That pivot was essential. Merely selling access wasn't enough to satisfy the investor demand for constant high engagement. They needed to capture your attention, not just your job search.
Let's trace that timeline of degradation. It starts in 2007, 4 years after launch, when they added infrastructure for professional photos. Now, on the surface, that sounds like a necessary...
It was, but the sources argue that even this seemingly small step profoundly watered down the focus. It immediately introduced a critical element of visual performance. Before, Your profile was about text and achievement. After, pictures of smiling professional people helped create the impression that LinkedIn was popular and worth joining, regardless of its actual utility. It subtly lowered the amount of actually useful information.
But the pivotal, undeniable move came in 2012. This is when LinkedIn pivoted away from connections almost entirely and toward the feed.
Correct. They started letting people follow other accounts, mimicking the model perfected by Twitter. Initially, this was restricted to big-name CEOs and high-profile politicians who would post, personal stories or business tips.
But they quickly extended that ability to
everyone.
Yeah.
Users were instantly pushed towards treating the site less like a professional database and more like a sanitized corporate version of Twitter or Facebook.
And that same year, the visual creep intensified. More pictures, more photos, more personal brand, making the platform look a lot more like...
And the reasons, again, mirrored the strategy of every other major social platform. Engagement was king. LinkedIn's primary goal shifted from facilitating professional networking to getting people to spend as much time as possible on the platform.
Right, because applying for jobs for 40 hours a week is frustrating, which leads to burnout.
But scrolling a feed of emotionally charged motivational content is high engagement, and that drives ad impressions and profit.
So they made the decision to start hiding the old, useful, bare-bones parts of the site, the functional direct, and replacing them with engaging visual content that had a much lower information depth.
And this transition fundamentally changed the entire system of rewards. The incentives were totally restructured, moving away from real-world utility.
Before this shift, the reward for using LinkedIn was external, right? An actual career benefit, a key introduction, a job offer.
Exactly. But now the sources argue the new incentive structure was purely internal to the platform, gathering likes, accumulating followers, and building what we call online clout.
By doing this, the platform created a totally self-contained parallel dimension to the work.
A liquid, always-on corporate world where your fabricated corporate persona becomes your dominant identity. In the real world, your ability to humble brag is governed by social convention. If you do it too much, people see through it.
LinkedIn removed those constraints, didn't it? They took that inherent baseline corporate fakeness that exists in every office and just supercharged it.
They turned it into an algorithmically amplified competition where performance reigns supreme. It became an explicit global contest of performance art. The algorithm, by design, rewards whoever can rub their success in other people's faces in the most engaging way.
Which brings us to the famous or infamous cringeworthy slop that now defines the feed. The specific examples in the source material are truly astounding.
They showcase the ultimate expression of this parallel reality, where personal tragedy and vulnerability are monetized as. You have CEOs posting detailed, tearful crying selfies right after they've just fired dozens of people.
Spinning their employees' suffering into a moment of personal vulnerability and content.
Right, or you see self-proclaimed thought leaders, often women, making up these elaborate fictional stories about how their LinkedIn follower count finally won their daughter's respect.
And it's all just to sell a book.
All to sell a book or drive their follower numbers higher. The audience isn't necessarily buying the story. They're buying the performance of aspirational success.
And the self-referential absurdity of it all reaches its extreme with that anecdote about Gary.
Gary is the perfect example of someone completely and pathologically invested in this parallel corporate world.
So what's his story?
The source tells of Gary, who is so devoted to creating and optimizing LinkedIn content that when his wife was possibly leaving him, a genuine, impending personal tragedy, he didn't process the human emotion. He immediately viewed it as merely a lesson for wannabe entrepreneur. He transformed his family's crisis into optimized, monetizable content, complete with bullet points and a hashtag about overcoming adversity.
That's horrifyingly detached. The platform has conditioned people to see real life, real suffering, not as lived human experiences, but as raw content to be packaged and sold for online clout.
It creates a reality where the performance becomes more important than the substance. And that makes the 2015 move, when LinkedIn fully integrated the social feed, feel less like a feature edition.
And more like the platform's final surrender.
The final nail, yes.
Yeah.
In 2015, LinkedIn fully dove in by adding the social media style feed. Before this, LinkedIn had, at least theoretically, been about enhancing the professional connections you already had.
And afterward,
the focus was completely abandoned. The idea became for users to use their online clout to chase career success, even though, for the vast majority, that success became what the sources call a pipe dream.
Now, the simple conclusion is that this was just a pure profit grab. Engagement equals profit. But the sources bring up a key quote from Reid Hoffman that suggests a deeper, almost ideological and...
That quote is absolutely critical. Hoffman stated his genuine interest was in making products that make us much better as a group, both better for us individually and better for the system.
Okay, so if we look at what LinkedIn actually became, this standardization for corporate performance, how do the sources interpret that?
The deep dive suggests this wasn't just about money. It was fundamentally about improving people and changing them to better fit into established corporate systems.
Wow.
By building this parallel performative world, LinkedIn's underlying goal was to turn individuals into standardized, predictable corporate marketplace participants. In short, the sources argue the philosophical objective was turning people into better drones.
Which is a heavy conclusion, but one that is hard to deny when we look at the actual result. A job marketplace that is experienced as profoundly broken and stacked against the average job seeker.
If you join this marketplace, you quickly realize it's not a free market based on skill. It's a controlled environment designed to be maximally advantageous for employers while taking as much of the power away from employees as possible.
Let's start with the spam problem, which is maybe the most obvious symptom of this failure. We've also the daily deluge of recruiter. The source material claims 99% of them are either irrelevant or untrustworthy.
And often they don't even match your location or your actual job title. Recruiters, many using those expensive premium accounts, were just sending messages to thousands of people indiscriminately, hoping for a tiny fraction of a percent return.
So why does LinkedIn tolerate this overwhelming volume of noise? They could easily crack.
The cynical interpretation is that it's a crucial engagement tactic. Spam generates notifications. It keeps people coming back to the site to check their notification, hoping the next message might be the one in the 1% that's actually relevant.
That tiny sliver of manufactured hope drives repeat visits.
Exactly. And it keeps the fear of missing out on a golden opportunity perpetually alive.
And applying for jobs yourself isn't any better, largely thanks to the phenomenon of ghost jobs.
Ghost jobs. They're the advertised openings that sound real, complete with descriptions and skills, but which aren't actually available for hire right now.
And companies use them for a whole host of reasons, none of which involve actually hiring you quickly.
It's a form of perpetual passive talent scouting. It allows them to identify someone vastly overqualified who might have applied to a lower role because they don't know their own worth, meaning the company gets a potential bargain. Or they're just seeing who's out there, what the salary ranges are.
It's market research disguised as opportunity.
Precise. And this isn't a small problem. The data points for the sources are staggering. They indicate the ghost job rate is currently around 30% across the platform.
And in certain industries, it can be double that.
Double that. Think about the psychological consequence. It means you could spend weeks or months meticulously working on applications, and over half of them are statistically guaranteed to be going nowhere because the job doesn't exist.
People are not built to deal with that level of rejection.
They're not. But the sources argue that going through this frustrating, low-reward process better conditions you for corporate life. It lowers your expectations and increases your tolerance for structural absurdity.
So if the job hunt is rigged, then the platform itself functions less like a professional repository and more like, well, the sources use the analogy of a dating.
That analogy is central to the modern critique. Creating a successful LinkedIn profile today is far more similar to making a highly optimized dating app profile than to writing a straightforward CV. It's about managing perception.
Which means insane job titles, not just accurate. It means dressing up your experience with corporate buzzwords and prioritizing the reach of your posts, your online performance over your actual...
Your real-world experience still helps, of course, but it matters significantly less than it used to because the good, accurate, understated profiles are simply getting lost in the overwhelming noise of the performance.
And just like the worst experience on dating apps, there's a fundamental imbalance that absolutely crushed. Recruiters are comparing your profile globally.
The result for employees, especially in tech role, mirrors the disproportionate male experience on platforms like Tinder. The numbers just don't add up. There are far more employees looking for quality jobs than there are available positions.
This imbalance forces job seekers to adopt that often futile shotgun approach.
Sending thousands of applications to whatever they can find just to get noticed by the algorithm.
And the flood of those applications then reinforces the employer's dangerous illusion of choice.
Absolutely. The sheer volume of applications pouring in, even if 90% are irrelevant, convinces employers they can be far more picky. They feel they can wait months or even years for that dream candidate, that unicorn, to come along.
And in the meantime, they ignore hundreds of highly qualified, suitable applicants.
Exactly. LinkedIn has convinced them the perfect candidate is just one search filter away, indefinitely extending the hiring cycle.
And throughout this entire crushing low reward process. The job seeker has to maintain the 204/7.
It is the ultimate extension of corporate power into private life. The performance people have always had to put on in offices pretending to care about banal projects has now been extended outside of working hours into perpetuity. It never switches off.
And perhaps the most jarring example of this is the post-layoff performance. Even after the company has fired you, the facade must not only continue, but intensify.
We saw this so vividly with the big tech layoffs, particularly Meta in 2022, when 11,000 employees were fired abruptly.
What happened?
Immediately, you saw the post flood LinkedIn. Employees felt compelled, almost required, to talk about how amazing Meta was, how grateful they were. They'd post pictures of their dog or their kids, essentially letting Instagram culture leak in. They all followed the same required script.
A script designed to advertise that they are marketable, non-toxic, positive resources who won't rock the boat. They are performing their own non-threatening re-entry to the marketplace.
And the irony inherent in this mandatory gratitude is devastating. Companies often couldn't care less how they fire people. They'll use cold, pre-recorded video messages, or employees find out because their security key stops working.
They treat employees as disposable, yet the fired employee must, under penalty of professional marginalization, express overwhelming public gratitude for the opportunity they just lost.
And this is where we reach the malicious structural effect on self-worth. Before LinkedIn, being fired, while painful, offered a critical psychological opportunity to finally leave the corporate performance behind.
You could take a breath and just be yourself for a
Exactly. But today, that opportunity for honest human decompression is structurally gone. The facade must be maintained while you simultaneously brace for the terrible process of the job hunt waiting around the corner.
It's a continuous structural attack on one's sense of self-worth. You have to constantly perform gratitude for a system that is actively...
And the sources warn, quite darkly, that the platform is only destined to get worse, not better, thanks to the accelerating rise of generative AI.
The slop problem is getting worse.
It's accelerating to an impossible degree. Anyone can now use ChatGPT to write a perfectly optimized, emoji-filled post about synergy in the workplace, and LinkedIn will happily spread that content slop to thousands because it's engineered to be high engagement.
A performance enhancer for corporate fakeness. It makes the signal-to-noise ratio just unsustainable.
At the same time, LinkedIn is actively hoovering up all this manufactured content. They are training their own proprietary AI models on the vast amounts of homogenized posts and personal data that users willingly provide.
So the performance is not only harming your sanity, it's actively feeding the very systems that will automate professional life even further.
Precisely. The cycle closes completely, and the sources are quite definitive on the immediate solution. The only way to prevent that data harvesting and step off the performance treadmill is to leave the platform entirely.
But, as we established earlier, for many professionals, that is simply not a viable option. The choice is between being digitally invisible and being psychologically drained. Okay, let's bring this all together. Let's synthesize the core takeaways for you, the learner, today.
Right. We have watched LinkedIn trend. It started as a necessary, simple tool for enhancing existing connections, a utility born from Reid Hoffman's cynical FOMO hack, and it has mutated into a performative, monetized, parallel corporate world.
A world driven by the monetization of hope, the competition for social clout, and the deliberate erosion of the job process.
Exactly.
So for you, the learner, understanding this cynical history and these structural mechanisms is absolutely key to preserving your sanity.
It really.
If you know the system is fundamentally designed not to find you a job quick, but to exploit your fear and keep you perpetually searching, you can navigate it without being completely consumed by its manufactured culture. You can detach yourself from the
Knowing the game is half the battle won. If you understand why those humble bragging posts about CEOs crying are successful, because they drive algorithmically valuable engagement, you can just ignore them.
knowing they aren't representative of real professional success.
Right. And if you understand that up to 30%, maybe more, of the jobs you apply for are fake, you can manage your expectations and radically temper the level of personal rejection you allow yourself to internalize.
And that leads to the final takeaway from the sources, which is advice for self-preservation. While one must do whatever it takes to succeed, and that often means having a LinkedIn profile, the sources argue that giving in completely to the corporate performance, allowing the script to consume you, is not truly necessary to keep yourself sane and to keep some part of you alive.
You can succeed without believing in all the underlying corporate nonsense. A final provocative thought for you to mull over as you navigate this performance space.
Let's hear it.
If LinkedIn's explosive foundational growth was fundamentally rooted in exploiting the basic, universal human fear of profession and the necessity of mandatory, how much of the professional value you receive on the platform today, clout, the connections, the opportunities, is real, structural, and how much is simply the self-perpetuating, algorithmically optimized illusion designed solely to keep the revenue?